صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخزعنها كل شيء وذللها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم له شيء وبعزمتك التي منعت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحت كل عصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النغم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أقطعتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك واستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من غربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وانزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعزم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عزم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وزهر أمرك وغلب غهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائه صاصرا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرعت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من غبي سترته وكم من فاتح من البلاء قلته وكم من عثار وغيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم أزم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وغادت بي أقلالي وحبسني النفع بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أنت لا يهجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفزحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وعصاتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شحواتي وغفلتي، وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رعوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنزل في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم احترس في من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أحواه وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، وتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعد أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك، ولزمني حكمك وبلاك. وقد آتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستغيلا مستغفرا منيبا مغرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إلي في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم زعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لمجد كرمك وصالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنورك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من اطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تزيى من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من أوبيته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، ولا ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مودها، ولا قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، ولا زمار حفت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، ولا جبارها سعد إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي أن قليلا من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، ألا أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكفوه يسير بغاه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل والحقير المسكين المستكين، يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها زج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته، فلن سيرتني للعقوبات مع عطائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، فهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر والنظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك وبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي، أقسم صادقا لن تركتني ناطقا لأزجن إليك بين أهلها زجيج العاملين ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولا أبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولو نادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين. يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، يا إله العالمين، أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وضاقت مع ضابها ومعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يزج إليك زجيج معملا لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي، فكيف يبغى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه، أم كيف يتغلغل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه، أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها، هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، وباليقين قطعوا لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وغزيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مغرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدس اسمك أقسمت أن تملاها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناك قلت مبتدأ وتتبلت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالغزية التي هتمتها وهكمتها وقلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة في هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل أملته كتمته أو أعلنته وأخفيته أو أزهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جبارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحصانا فزلت أو بر نشرت أو رزقا بسطت أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا رب يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا لي من بزري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل يا غوتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا رب غبو على خدمتك جبارهي واشدد على العزيمة جوانهي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين واشتاق إلى غربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جبارك مع الموقنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك، وأغربهم منزلة منك، وأخسهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، واعتف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأغلني أثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك غزيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وزمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا رب مددت يدي، وبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رعس ماله الرجاء، وصلاح البكاء. يا سابق النغم، يا دافع النغم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآله، وافعل بما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات, and for all those who have helped prepare for this majlis today, please recite Surah Al-Fatiha, but before it, the loudest of your salawat. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's always a blessing and an honor to see the beautiful faces of the mu'minin and the mu'minat here with us today. And while last week we had the joyous occasion of celebrating Eid al-Ghadir together, and we were honored with the blessings of Syed Tayyab, who enlightened us with his speech. Next week, we turn our hearts to Karbala, where we commemorate the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abu Abdullah. And so, another sad event that we have is that today is Sayyid Tayyab's last day with us. He has honored us. He's always been someone who responds immediately. Even though our request has been very short-sighted, but he's always responded, and he's always helped us and blessed us with his presence. And we feel honored, and we would love to see more of Sayyid Tayyab. And if you would love to see more of Sayyid Tayyab, please let him know with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, we will always have his presence here. May Allah grant him tawfiq in everything that he does. One other announcement is that inshallah next week we will begin the commemoration of Ashura starting Tuesday. Tuesday night will be the first night of Ashura, the first night of Muharram. This year it's going to be a little bit different, the program. We're going to start, the email should reflect this, inshallah, and the flyers should be sent out soon if they're not already in the social media. We will start at 7 o'clock sharp with Ziyarat Ashura, and then we will commence with dinner at 7:30, and then we will turn to Salah, then the muhadara, the speech, and then finally we will end with Latmiya. So the difference is that normally we would have tabarruk and dinner at the very end. This time we're going to have it before the speech, just to allow for families who have children, people who have work the next day. A lot of them want to come to the majalis, but they can't spend too much, they can't be here too late at night. So inshallah, we try to accommodate everybody. And without further ado, please help me in welcoming Syed Tayyab al-Mosavi with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يوصينا معه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بهد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود فترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان عرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. Dear brothers and sisters, first and foremost, as Brother Tariq said, this is my last day here, but it's always an honor to come to the center, and Brother Tariq knows whenever I'm available, I'm more than welcome. I'm more than happy to come in here, give a speech, because to be honest, every person that goes to school, they go to school and they practice or they study a specific field. For example, a doctor, if they're on call and they're asked to come and help, would they say no? No. Why? Because their job requires them to help mankind. The same way the ulama that come here, if they're ever asked, we don't have someone, can you come and do it? Their job requires them to help mankind. Why? The only difference between a doctor and alim that comes here is that the doctor, they only take care of physical ailments. They take care of the physical aspect of this individual. Whereas the khatibs, the scholars that come here, they take care of the spiritual aspect of this individual. So it's always a blessing, it's always an honor when I'm invited here. And I will never say no in the future. Inshallah, Brother Tariq doesn't have to worry about that. Whenever I'm available and I'm here in town, and I'm invited, inshallah. But as Brother Tariq said, next week starts the month of Muharram. And as we're doing Latmiya, as we're in those speeches, listening those speeches about Abu Abdullah al-Husayn al-Islam, because my speech today ties in with Muharram itself. When we do all of that, we have to remember the reason Sayyid al-Shuhada gave his life. What was the reason that he gave? What was the reason that he sacrificed not just himself, but he sacrificed a 6-month-old baby? What was the reason for that? You have to remember, when he rose up and he said, what? I'm not rising up for power. I'm rising up, why? For amal bil maruf and nahi anil munkar. When it comes to amal bil maruf, when it comes to some of those things and enjoining good on people, one of the things that you realize that Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam, from the Holy Prophet to the 12th Imam, one of the things everyone constantly enjoyed on all the Muslims was what? Salat. Salat. The most important of the Farauddin, Salat. If you look at Salat itself, you look at Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam in Karbala, when he was martyred, he was in a state of sajda. When the battle started, he was in a state of salat. He was constantly praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does this tell you about the importance of salat? What does this tell you about why Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam sacrificed himself? The last act that he was doing while he was being martyred was he was in a state of sajda. He was in a state of sajda. And many of us, we don't realize how important salat is. How important it is. Some of the youngsters, we get so caught up in our daily life, whether it be school, whether it be work, it doesn't matter. We get so caught up, what happens? We end up missing salat. We end up praying it qaza. Inshallah, at the end, a little moral, a story that has a little moral at the end about why you shouldn't pray late. Whenever you can, pray on time. And you should always pray on time. But when it comes to salat, why is salat so important within Islam itself? Christianity, they have a form of, they pray, but they pray in their own way. Judaism has form of prayers, they pray in their own way. But when it comes to Islam, Islam has its own way of prayer. Correct? Of these three, we as Muslims, we pray the way the Holy Prophet has told us to pray. Why is that? If you look at how Jews used to pray in the past, if you look at how Christians used to pray in the past, they used to pray the same way we used to pray. The same way we used to pray. Meaning what? The same way we put our forehead on the ground, the Christians would also put their forehead on the ground. Yes, they did not use the turba the way the Shias use the turba, but they also put their forehead on the ground. The same way that we do ruku, the Christians and the Jews would do ruku. They do ruku the same way. The same way we do sajda, they do sajda. But what happened as time went on, influences came within their religion and their prayer changed. That's it. That happened in Judaism, that happened in Christianity, and that happened in Islam. That happened in Islam. Why do I say that happened in Islam? You look at the Muslims. Do they all pray the same? No. No, they don't. Some Muslims, when they pray, when they stand for prayer, they close their hands up here on the chest. Some Muslims, they close their hands on the belly button. Some Muslims lower. Other Muslims, like us, open hands. If prayer had not been changed, then why is it that Muslims today, they pray 4 different ways? It tells you that even within Islam, the way some of these amal that we have, some of these furu'ud-din that we have, it's changed. It's changed. Where did this change from? That's not what I'm talking about today. Why? Because my topic today is salat itself and how important salat is. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When you look at the history of the Imams or you look at the history of the Prophets, that's absolutely true. We can look at the history of the Imams and we can see the courageousness of the Imams. We can see the zuhud of the Imams. We can see all of these aspects of the Imams. But when it comes to the Prophets, for example, when it comes to Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, he's a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when he's talking from that cradle, when he's only a couple of hours old, he's talking from that cradle. What does he say? Qala inni Abdullah. He says the first thing that he is the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Atani al-kitab, I've been given the book, wa ja'alani nabiyya, and then I have been sent as a prophet. Correct? But the first thing Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam testifies to is what? Is it his prophethood? No. The first thing that he testifies to is that he is Abdullah. He is the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how do you prove yourself to be the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In Islam, the foremost, the spearhead of all of these furu'ud-din is salat. The spearhead of all of these furu'ud-din that we have is salat. That is the best way that you prove that you are an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because when you're praying, even though a lot of us don't do it, you're supposed to be completely cognizant of who are you standing in front of. Who you're standing in front of. And this is a problem that a lot of us have. We don't realize who we're standing in front of. So what do? Our prayer is done in 4 minutes. Our prayer is done in 2 minutes. Our prayer is done in 5 minutes. We're speedily praying. I want to ask everyone, if you were standing in, everyone that has a job, if you were standing in front of your boss, would you speak to them as fast as you pray? No, you would not. You would not. Anyone that's going to school, would you speak to your teacher as fast as you pray salat? No, you would not. No, you wouldn't. Why? Because you know yourself that that is disrespectful to who you're standing in front of. That's disrespectful to who you're standing in front of. Why is it that when it comes to the jobs, when it comes to teachers, when it comes to bosses, we're perfectly willing to cater to their wants, to cater to their needs, and give them the due respect that we feel they deserve. But when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't give them that respect. We don't give them that respect. Why is that? It's because we don't know, or we haven't fully understood Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We give respect to our boss. Why? Because we know that this boss, they can fire us today if they want to. Out of fear, we give them respect. We give that teacher respect. Why? Because we know that they hold our grades in their hands. If we're disrespectful to them, they might give us a B, a C, a D, or for some people an A- when they're looking for that A+. We know that they hold our grades in their hands. It's because we're afraid of that power that they have that we give them the due respect. But when it comes to us Shias, when it comes to Islam, we as Muslims, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has complete authority, complete power, more power than any other individual. Yet what do? Even though we know He has that power, we also know He's Arhamur Rahimin. And because He's Arhamur Rahimin, we take advantage of that rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We take advantage of that rahmat. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, He knows that these servants of mine, they're going to take advantage of that. They're going to take advantage of that. That's the reason every time we sin, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the authority to punish us, He doesn't punish us. Why? Because He's constantly left the gates of what? Tawbah open for every single individual. The gates of repentance open. Why is salat important? If you pick up any Islamic laws book, any marjas, it doesn't matter whose taqleed you do. If you pick up any marjas Islamic laws book and you go to Bab Salat, the section of Salat, they all have one narration from the Holy Prophet. All of them, they have one narration, famous narration. And what is that narration about Salat? What does salat do? Tanha anil? Thank you so much. 1. 2. When you pray, it keeps you away from fash. It keeps you away from sins. Correct? Second hadith that they have is that anyone that prays 5 times a day, the same hadith, it applies for wuzu also. Anyone that prays 5 times a day, they're getting rid of their sins the same way someone washes their body. The same way. You'll see these 2 narrations in any Marja's Islamic laws book, in Bab Salat, when they're speaking about Salat. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the barakah, look at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's wajib. It's wajib. Correct? It's like if you were given homework by a teacher, or if you were given a project by your manager, by your boss. That's something that you're being paid for, yes or no? That means that you have to do it. There is no praise if you do it. No, that's something you have to do. But when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though prayer is something that is wajib, something you have to do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say? When this abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wakes up for Salatul Layl, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He looked at all the angels and He looks at them and He says, look at this servant of mine. This servant of mine has gotten up in the middle of the night to do my ibadat when all of these others, they're just sleeping and wasting their time. Wasting their time. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, all of these Imams, what did they say about prayer? No one, Zainul Abidin, the ornament of the people that do sajda, abids, ornament of the worshippers, correct? Sayyid Sajidin, the Sayyid of the people that do sajda. He's given that laqab. Why? He's one of our imams. Yet we don't follow his footsteps. We don't follow his. I said earlier that we don't concentrate in namaz, in prayer. In prayer. Imam Muhammad Baqir, Imam Jafar, Imam Zainab, all of these imams, they say that the amount of your prayers that gets accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the amount of concentration you had when you were praying. The amount of your prayer that gets accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the amount of concentration. Meaning what? Meaning if you were only concentrated when you said Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and afterwards you are somewhere else, then only that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. The further or the more concentration you have, the more of your prayers is accepted. And Imams, they say that this is the reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told people to do the nawafil. Why? Because these nawafil make up for that. You not being attentive in your wajib prayers, the nawafil, they make up for you not being attentive in your wajib prayers. But some of us, we don't do the nawafil. Maybe we don't have time. When you're in jama'at, you don't have time. That's fine. Salatul Layl. What's the excuse for Salatul Layl? We don't wake up at night. That's no problem. You can pray qaza. And it's better. Salatul Layl is better to pray qaza than it is to pray it before nisf al-layl. Pick up any marjas. It's better to pray Salatul Layl qaza than it is to pray it before midnight. What's the excuse? Even if you were to pray it qaza, even if you were to pray it late, it makes up for you not being attentive in your wajib prayers. Correct? But what do? We pray our wajib prayers at the very last minute. We pray at the very last minute. And this very last minute, just a quick moral story. There was a young man, he would be busy just the same way that we're all busy. And he'd come back from school and just waste his time. Either he'd do his, after his studies, he'd waste his time. He would pray his Zuhr and Asr prayer when there was like maybe 10 minutes left for Maghrib. 10 minutes left for Maghrib. And what would he do? He would pray it quickly. Why? Because he doesn't want it to be qaza. He'd constantly do this. One time, what does he do? He comes back from school. He sees that his grandmother, elderly lady, she's praying completely calm. She's praying without a care in the world. She's praying with attention to what she's saying. And then he starts thinking about how he's praying. And he starts thinking, he goes, I'm this young. I do my prayers, or I finish my prayers within 10 minutes. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And this is my grandma. She's 85, she's 90 years old, and she takes her time. I don't have that patience. So what does he do? He comes back one day and he does his Zuhr. After he was done, he was reading du'as. He puts his head on the sajda to finish his prayer. When he puts his head on the sajda, he was very tired. He ended up going to sleep in a state of sajda. When he goes to sleep, all of a sudden he hears a bang and he tries to wake up. When he opens his eyes, he sees that there's just people everywhere around him. And he sees that it's looking to him like it's the day of judgment. There's just people everywhere. He's calling out for people. No one's listening. He's asking people, what's going on? Where am I? No one hears anything. All of a sudden, he sees that two people, they come from the back, they grab him by the arms, and they take him in the front. They take him in the front, and they put him in the center of the event. When they put him in the center, he realized that this is the day of judgment. He's looking at his book of Amal. He's looking at his book of Amal. And now that he's done looking at the book, he's just waiting for judgment to be passed. And as soon as judgment was passed, the first name that they read about the people that were going to go to Jahannam was his name. Was his name. He hears his name and he starts screaming. He starts fighting. He goes, no, why am I going to Jahannam? Why am I going to hell? I was of those people that prayed. I was of those people that read the Quran. I was of those people that would do what we're going to do in Muharram. We come for the Azadari of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, but we don't understand, or as soon as we leave the gathering, we forget the reason he sacrificed himself. I was of those people that would volunteer at the mosque. I was of those people that helped others. The two angels, they're dragging him by the feet. They take him to Sirat and they're about to toss him. When they're about to toss him, he yells even louder. He yells even louder and he says, but I'm a Muslim. What about my prayers? What did they do? They toss him. As soon as they toss him, he starts yelling. And when he starts yelling, falling down 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, as soon as he's fallen down a couple of feet, all of a sudden a hand reaches down, grabs him and pulls him up. Reaches down, grabs him and pulls him up. And he dusts himself off and he looks at him and he goes, thank you so much, who are you? And the man, he was a very old man. And he says, what? He says, I'm your prayers. I'm your prayers. And that's when this youngster, he gets angry and he says, you're my prayers, where were you this whole time? Why did you wait until the last minute? Why did you wait until the last minute to save me? I was about to go to hell. And the old man, he says, if you hadn't waited until the last minute to pray the salat, then I wouldn't have waited until the last minute to help you here. If you had prayed me on time in the beginning, I would have helped you in the beginning. But because you waited that long, I waited that long. Look at what he says. He says, I would have gone to hell. Why did you wait until the last minute? I would have gone to hell. He's blaming what? The prayers. Even though he himself was doing the exact same thing. He himself was putting himself into hell by praying the last minute. But we don't understand that. This is what happens. And I know that we hear about Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam saving. That's absolutely true. They all will. But Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, look, if our Shias worry about their barzakh, if they take care of themselves for their barzakh, one of us will take care of them in the akhirah. If they take care of themselves for barzakh. And for some reason, a lot of Muslims, for one reason or another, they think as soon as a person is deceased and they're put in the ground, it's their akhirah. It's the day of judgment for them. No, it's not the day of judgment. The day of judgment is when everything ceases to exist. When everything ceases to exist. And you and I do not know when that day of judgment is. Everyone that is in the ground right now, where are they? They're in Alim al-Barzakh. Barzakh, what does Barzakh mean? It's the famous verse of the Quran also, where there's a Barzakh between the two seas, where one does not overflow or overtake the other, even though that the Mufassirin say that is related to Amir al-Mu'minin and Lady Zahra sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Barzakh itself, what does it mean? It's a divider. Barzakh is a divider. That's it. What is that barzakh dividing? That barzakh is dividing this world, separator, divider. Same thing. It's separating or dividing this world from the day of judgment. Everyone that is in the ground right now, they're where? In Alim al-Barzakh. That Alim al-Barzakh is either going to look like heaven for an individual or it's going to look like hell for an individual. And that all depends on what? The amal that we do. The amal that we do. And as the Holy Prophet said, none of your amal will be accepted unless your prayers were accepted. If your prayers are accepted, then know that all of your amal will be accepted. If your prayers are accepted, then all of your amal will be accepted. Meaning what? Meaning that this azadari, there's also another narration that has to do with the rights of the parents. And I just want to say to the youngsters, even though the imams have said that if you want your amals to be accepted, they'll be accepted when? When your prayers are accepted. But when will your prayers be accepted? Do you all know? Even for your prayers to be accepted, there's a condition. The imams, they say that anyone that disrespects their parents, even looks at them in a state of anger, their prayers will not be accepted. Their prayers will not be accepted. But the amal that we're going to do in the month of Ramadan, or in the month of Muharram, afwan, this azadari of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, as Syed Kumayl rahmatullah alayhi, he had said that this azadari is insurance for us Shi'as, for our afterlife. It's insurance. What would happen if this insurance was taken away from us? We'd be left to ourselves. For this insurance, you need to pray. For this insurance to take effect, when it needs to take effect, you need to pray. Correct? If this is insurance, every month, what do you do? What do you have to do? Thank you so much. Whether it be life insurance, whether it be car insurance, whether it be house insurance, you have to pay every month. Why? Because when your life is in danger, your car, something happens to your car, something happens to your life, something happens to your house, what will happen? They'll cover you. If this azadari is insurance, what is your payment for you to be covered in the afterlife? It's these prayers. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, these prayers. And what will happen if these prayers aren't accepted? What will happen to us? We'll be left to ourselves. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Amir al-Mu'minin himself, he says, sermon number 199 or 199, 198, and some of the Nahj Balaghas, where he talks about prayers, and what does he say? He says, pledge yourself to prayers. Pledge yourself to prayers and remain steadfast on it. Remain steadfast on it. Offer prayers as much as possible and seek nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through them. Through them. Why? Because these prayers, they're an imposition, they've been imposed, they're a wajib on every believer. And there are a timed ordinance. Meaning what? Meaning that there's a time to do them. If you're steadfast in your prayers, that means that you're praying on time. If you're steadfast. That's what Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying. If you want to be steadfast, pray on time. Not, I have this to do 5 minutes later. That 5 minutes turns into 10. That 10 minutes turns into 20. And then by the time you realize it's almost Maghrib time and you need to pray quickly. The makruhat of salat, the imams, they say try to stay away from them. The musahabat of salat, try to do them. The wajibat of salat, they need to be done to begin with. But the musahabat of salat, the imams, they say, try to do them. And the Holy Prophet himself, he says what? He says that anyone who does not attach importance to his prayers and considers them to be unimportant deserves to be sent to hell. Anyone that does not attach importance to prayers deserves to be sent to hell. 1. 2. Masjid Nabawi, there's a youngster, and I know I'm picking on the youngsters, but whoever in this gathering considers themselves to be a youngster, this applies to all of them. But there was a youngster, he was praying, but he was praying very quickly. And everyone's aware when you pray quickly, your ruku is not a complete ruku. Your sajda is not a complete sajda. You just do the movements, that's it. This young man, he was praying that way. The Holy Prophet, he goes into the masjid and he sees him in this state. He's praying like this. And the Holy Prophet, he says that if this young man dies praying like this, then he hasn't died on my religion. If this young man dies while he's praying like this, he hasn't died on my religion. What does this mean, Ya Rasulullah? He said, La ilaha illallah. He said, Muhammad Rasulullah. But you yourself, you say if he dies like this, even though he said La ilaha illallah, even though he said Muhammad Rasulullah, because he's praying this way, he hasn't died on your religion. What does that mean? That means that La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah is not just for the tip of your tongue. You need to show that in your actions, what that means. You need to show that in your actions. And how do you show it in your actions? By obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's nothing greater obedience, or there's no greater obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than prayer. Than prayer. When you look at prayer, Surah Al-Hamd itself, what does the Prophet say? What did the Imam say? The first part of Surah Al-Hamd is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first part. What's the rest of Surah Who is the rest of Surah Al-Hamd for? Us. Why? Because it's a dua. The end of Surah Al-Hamd is a dua that we stay on what? The right path. Why would you not want to do dua for yourself in a calm manner? Why would you not want to do dua for yourself with complete attention to what you're saying, to who you're saying it to? This is Surah Al-Hamd. This is prayer. And look at prayer itself. What is one of the things, if you read the sermon of Lady Zahra sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she says that prayer, what does prayer take away? Or what does prayer keep you away from? The Quran, it says fasha. Correct? Lady Zahra sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she says that prayers keeps you away from arrogance. Prayer keeps you away from becoming arrogant. If you think about that, If you think about that, is there tazad between what Lady Zahra said and what the Quran said? No, there isn't. Why? Because Lady Zahra went to the core of everything. She went to the core. Arrogance is what leads to what? Sinning. Arrogance is what leads to sinning. What do I mean? Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Arrogance is what leads to sinning. What do I mean? This idea that just me, I, me. There's no one except me. Lady Zahra, she says what? Prayer keeps arrogance away from you. How does it keep arrogance away from you? Think about it. When this human being, they're on their hands, feet, knees, and their forehead is to the ground, and they're saying, Subhana Rabbil Ala wa bihamdeh. When they utter these words, how can arrogance then come into this human being? Why? Because they're on their hands, their knees, they're on the ground, their forehead is on the ground. And they're doing what? They're extolling someone else in that state. When they're in that state, how can arrogance come into this individual? That's what Lady Zahra says. That's why she says what? It keeps arrogance away from an individual. Why? Because arrogance is what leads to fahsha. Arrogance is what leads to all these other types of sins. When you say, no, you know what, it's just me. Me. Who can stop me? And this is what the problem is with this individual, this human being, this I. And this is what the imams, this is what the prophets, they tried to come and get rid of this I. They tried their best to get rid of this I. This is one of the reasons this salat was wajib, to get rid of this I. But humanity itself, it hasn't completely gotten rid of it. We still have work to do. But the Quran itself, it says what? Chapter 74, it says, what has brought you into hell? What has brought you into hell? They shall say, we were of those who offered the prayers regularly. We were of those who did not offer the prayers regularly. 1, 2. In another place in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Waylun lil Musallin. Thank you so much. In one place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Wail. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, what is wrong? What has happened to these people that pray? What's happened to these people that pray? And over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking, what has brought you into hell? And there are going to be a group of people that say what? We weren't of those who prayed. We weren't of those who prayed. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He keeps us on this path of Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this coming month of Muharram. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all the tawfiq of crying or shedding these tears for the sake of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, and on the day of judgment that Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, he himself, he blesses us with shafa'at. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. If there's any questions, inshallah, 10 minutes about questions. Yes. Alaykum salam. No, my pleasure. Yes. Yes. Because what these people did not, and that's a good point the brother makes, is if you look at history and the people that fought against Amir al-Mu'minin Nahrawan, the Khawarij, you'll see that historians, they say that these people, they used to have marks of frustration. They used to have marks of frustration on their forehead Not only that, but because they used to fast all day, what would they do? They tie stones around their stomach so the stomach wouldn't make noise. But they still came out and fought against Amir al-Mu'mineen. Correct? When it came to Karbala, when it came to Imam Hassan al-Islam, it was these same people that fought against Imam Hassan al-Islam. When it came to Karbala, you had these same types of people that came and fought against Abu Abdullah al-Hussein al-Islam. Why didn't it help them? Do you all know? What did they not have? Thank you so much. That's what they did not have. They did not understand the wilayat of Amir. The verse of the Quran that I started this lecture off with, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Zahiran ya'budun means worship. But all of the imams, if you look at any tafsir of the Quran that we have, you see that the imams, they've done the tafsir of liya'budun to mean liya'rifun. Meaning what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have not created the jinn and the ins except for knowing me. Liya'rifun. Meaning except for that they try to get to know me. These Khawarij, how could they understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without going through Amir al-Mu'mineen, without going through Abu Abdullah al-Husayni? These are the gates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why it didn't help them. Because they didn't know how to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you see that same problem. You see, the Holy Prophet said what? Ana madinatul ilm wa aliyan babaha. That's it. That should have been enough for them to say that, hold on a second, the Holy Prophet has made Ali alayhi salam the gate to himself, so I should go through him. That should have been more than enough. But that wasn't. It was because they didn't have that wilayah within them. They didn't want to understand that wilayah. Two, jealousy, yes. No. Yes. Yes, but Shaitan, what happened with Shaitan? It was because of arrogance. There's a story where the Holy Prophet, Shaitan comes in front of the Holy Prophet. And Shaitan, he says to the Holy Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, is it possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives me? And the Holy Prophet says, yes, it's still possible. To Shaitan. He says, yes, it's possible. But Shaitan says, well, what should I do? He goes, do sajda to Adam. Do sajda to Adam. Shaitan, he replies, Ya Rasulullah, but Adam, he's passed away. He's gone. The Holy Prophet, he says, go to his grave and do sajda in front of his grave. Go to his grave and do sajda in front of his grave. Shaitan says no. What was that? That same arrogance that was there when Hazrat Adam was in the heavens, that same arrogance still existed. And you see that same arrogance existed within a lot of these people in Mecca and Medina. In Mecca and Medina. If that arrogance did not exist, Sakhifa would not have happened. If that arrogance did not exist, Sakhifa would not have happened. But the fact that Sakhifa happened told you what? And the reason Sakhifa happened. And that's not something I want to get into right now, but if you look at the history, read the history of why Sakhifa happened, you realize that was the exact same reason. That I, the people that did Sakhifa, that was the same exact reason.